going on, everybody? Thanks for tuning back in. Today, we're going to dive into the world of data validation in NodeJS, and we're going to be looking at it with a powerful library called Joy. Whether you're a beginner or an experienced developer, validating data is a crucial aspect of building robust and secure applications. Joy simplifies this process, making it easier to define schemas and validate data in your projects. You might be asking yourself, what is Joy? Joy, spelled J-O-I, is a popular library for data validation in Node.js. It provides a simple and expressive way to define schemas for your data and validate that data against those schemas. You're going to need to define schemas for all sorts of requests that you're going to be passing into your application, and using a library like Joy is going to make it very easy. The way I'm about to teach you right now, you can apply as a piece of middleware in your project, or you could follow along with a project that I've already built for you. In this case, I'm going to be starting with a project that uses Typescript Decorators to do my routing. So anytime you see one of my controllers, you're going to see routing at the top using different sorts of requests. And you're also going to see a controller decorator at the top as well, which defines the root of your controller. If you want a deeper explanation, I have two videos linked below in which I create the API and then I add the decorators, and it will give you all the information you need on how to use them. In this video, I'm going to be adding the validation inside a decorator as well. That way I can keep it in sync with the rest of my projects. Now that we have everything we need, let's get started. The first thing you're going to want to do is run an npm install joy. We don't need to add any dev dependencies with types because they automatically come with this package. Once you've done that, you can head on over to the decorators folder and create a new validate.ts file. If you're not doing this decorator style and you're doing this as a piece of middleware, make another middleware function for yourself in that folder. I'm not going to show it inside this video, but I will provide a validate.ts file in the middleware folder just so you can apply that to your project if you aren't using decorators. At the top of your validate.ts file, we're going to import request, response, and next function from Express because the decorator is going to be modifying a piece of Express middleware or a request handler. Next, we're going to define our decorator. So decorators are always one function returning another. And in our case, the top function is always going to be what you need to pass into the decorator. And in our case, that's going to be a schema, and that's going to be of type joy.objectSchema. Then on the inside, you're going to return a function. This is always going to be the same for function decorators. It's always going to be a target of any, a property key of type string, which is the function name, and then a descriptor, which is of type property descriptor. The descriptor.value is the actual function you're going to be modifying and injecting. Whenever you're modifying the function to do something before the actual function calls, you're going to want to create a copy of that by doing a const original method is equal to descriptor.value. At the bottom, you can just return the descriptor, and then in between here is where we're going to modify our descriptor.value. So what we're going to do is make this equal to an async function. And then usually when you see examples for decorator, people will just pass in ... args here. So the spread operator and then the args array. But we're going to pass in our request, response, and next functions because we know what kind of function this is going to be a decorator for. So only use this for actual Express middleware. Otherwise, this isn't going to work properly. But I'm going to define them here because we always know the function this is going on to. Next, on the inside, at the end of the function, you can do a return. You can take the original method .call, pass in the this object, and then the request, response, and next. And now before that is where you want to throw in your try catch and actually do your modifications. So here we're going to be calling the joy method to validate the schema that we pass in. Inside of the try block, we're going to just simply do an await schema.validateAsync and then pass in the request.body because the request body is what we're always going to be validating to see what kind of data we want passed in. Then inside the catch block, you can log the error. You can do a console.error and pass in the error here. Inside of my projects, I have this logging library that I use that I made just for simple modifications. So I'm going to be doing a logging.error here. And then inside you can return a response.status, and here you can do a 404 not found or a 400 or whatever you want. 422 is an unprocessable entity, I believe. So this is usually the one people pick for this library. And I think the library documentation uses this one itself. So we're going to do a 422 and then pass in the error into the JSON so that when you get the error, you can see what you're missing inside of your validation. So if you're writing this like a piece of middleware, this is basically what goes inside your middleware. And instead of returning the original method.call, all you would do here is put the next function. So again, you'll see that example put inside of the project for you. So this is pretty much all we need, either this decorator or this piece of middleware. And now what we're going to do is go back to our class and actually apply this. So inside of my main controller here, I have this post health check route, which all it does is just return the body you pass in to show you that, that this API is actually up and running properly. So at the top of this class here, instead of putting it in a separate file, we'll just put it here for now because we're not actually using a database or anything. We're going to define our schema. So what we're actually going to accept inside of a body for our post health check method. So at the top, we're going to import joy from joy again. And then here we're just going to declare a const post health check validation. And that's going to be equal to a joy.object. Inside of that object, we're going to pass in, let's pass in two different things here. Let's just do a name. And let's just make this a string that's required. So what you'll do is joy.string as a function, and then required as a function. And then maybe we'll add description of joy.string, and then you can see this list here when you open it up. You could do all sorts of different things here. You can have a base64 encoded, you can have a data URI, you can have a credit card, you can have an email, you can have a whole bunch of stuff. You know what? Let's change this to email to keep the example simple, and we'll change description to email and do a joy.string.email. But here we won't set it to required, so you can see that we can pass it in and out, and whether we include it or not, it'll work. I encourage you to read the Joy documentation and look through the list of all of the different things you can have on a string, on a number, on all different sorts of data types that Joy accepts. There's plenty of options, and pretty much everything you need has been thought of. And what's pretty cool on the string is there's even a regex function, which if something isn't in here that you're looking for, like email wasn't here, we could have provided the email regex for the same effect. Now all we simply have to do is go to our function, and underneath our route, we can add our validate. And before we do that, let's actually make this a capital inside of the export function validate because we want to keep everything looking the same. I'm super OCD about my code, I apologize. And when we import that, let's pass in our post health check validation into the validate, and you'll see that it accepts it. There's no errors. And now it's time to test this to make sure that the validate function is working properly and there are no issues when we call the function. So go ahead and start up your project with NodeMon. And I'm going to open up Postman first to test this because this is generally what I use for testing. But I'll also show you how to use that REST plugin that we talked about in the last video that is included in the suggestions inside of this Visual Studio Code project. So if you aren't sure about which plugin I'm talking about, you can go to the repo and take a look at the suggestions for the ones I'm using in this project. That can be found in the extensions.json in the .vs code folder. So let's go ahead and test with our localhost 1337, and we'll do a /health check, making sure we have post selected, and see what happens. And you're going to see that it fails because name is required. So let's go ahead and add a body to this and select raw and make sure the content type is JSON, and then pass in a name through the JSON and then see if it works. And when I pass in the name Bubba, you can see that it works. Now let's test the email without an email and make sure it fails. And you can see that the email must be a valid email. So let's make this bubba@bubba.com. And we can see that it's just a simple email regex because now it works. So let's pass in a third one called description, which we haven't defined. And we'll just say, hey. And when we hit send, we'll see that this fails because description is not allowed. So you can see that the schema has been defined properly and is working in the way that we expect it to. And if you look at your console, you'll see a couple of 422s have been returned. You can see the errors get printed out in the console. So when you check the server logs, you can see what happened when people are sending through requests that they shouldn't be. And finally, if you want to test with the REST client plugin, simply change this health check to a post. Underneath it, you're going to have to declare the content type. As you can see when I send the request here, it fails because there's no name. So declare the content type as application JSON. Make sure you put a space after, and then pass in your name and just double check to make sure that it works. And you can see on the side we get the 200 returned, and everything seems to be still working properly. So there you have it. With one simple decorator or piece of middleware, you can protect your post requests, patches, puts, anything where you're passing in a body that needs to be defined exactly so you know what's coming through to help protect you from bad information or malware or somebody trying to hack your API. A library like this can absolutely help you secure it 90% of the way. You're still going to need some other things, but data validation is super important to prevent all sorts of basic attacks. You're not going to stop Mr. Robot from hacking in here, but you'll definitely stop scam call centers from stealing all of your money. So that's good. All right, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.